But going back to Sapiens, I mean, he does some really weird things. I mean, I don't understand why he does this. And this is like some very simple thing that he misrepresents. And I mean, it's like, say for example, like the divergence between the chimp and the human.
Yeah.
He takes that up early and say, "Oh, it's like 6 million years ago."
I actually have that marked. I can actually read that quote, I think.
Yeah, but the only problem is that this is not really a thing. The genetic testing is that puts the span between 6 and 23 million years ago
Right.
because it's that imprecise. But here you can see again, you know, his preference for, in a sense, taking a non-humanist stance. I wouldn't call it humanist, perhaps, but not a pro-human stance. It's always taking the worst option when he can take an option. It's like you. He's also taking the idea that humanity evolved from the Australopithecus species, the South apes,
Mhm.
which
Which, when I
there
read it, I had like a bell go off that that's something that's recently been at least
yeah, yeah,
called into
yeah.
question quite
Yeah,
strongly.
it doesn't, and it's not really recently. It's more like it has hit public consciousness recently. It's almost
Well,
20
yes,
years of
probably.
research that humanity doesn't really share almost any genetic material with the Australopithecus branch of human man apes, if you want to use that kind of term. The thing is that, I think it's he puts that because it's a central key to the out of Africa theory, which is looking more and more to be disproved by modern genomic testing and
Yes.
mitochondrial DNA data.
Yeah,
Just
he
a
goes
side
really
note,
hard on being like specifically Africa, which I
yeah,
also was like, that's the thing that's being called into question as well.
yeah. The
uh,
thing is that essentially there are humans with Australopithecian or originated DNA, probably from the Homo habilis species, uh, but and that existed within the African subcontinent. The only problem with this at that the this genetic material does not exist within uh, North American, European, or Asian subgroups. It only exists actually in with peoples originating from sub-Saharan Africa, and it's a quite strong genetic marker, between 18 and 19% in various African populations, and Europeans and Asians have bagel zero of Homo habilis genetics in that sense, because they are divergence. So what seems to have been happening is that it's not really an out of Africa theory. It's rather an into Africa idea. So that essentially the genetic data and some of this genetic testing is also going into validating some older archaeological finds within the Siberian Asian complex within the Central Asia, rather Central and Northern Asia, as perhaps a cradle for not perhaps the Homo species, but for Homo sapiens. So, and
yes.
here's another thing to remember about the Australopithecus is that they have a very different feet displacement. They have an arboreal feet arrangement, like let's say a modern orangutan. Essentially, that they don't have the big toe as we have it, but it's rather acting as a secondary thumb.
Hmm.
And the time aspects here between these divergence and just a couple of million nodes, it's not enough time to have changed in such a way to from that feet arrangement to our. It doesn't happen. Such dramatic changes does not happen on that small time scale. It just doesn't.
Yeah,
But that's a sidebar, because essentially when you can't draw genetic lineage, then that theory is dead, essentially.
Yeah, that's my point. If you're not sure, why are you asserting it? But that's sort of how he gets away with a lot in this book. He just sort of like says it, and then
Yeah.
that he's authoritarian or authoritative, I suppose, enough in his tone that as the author that it works out for him. The second chapter, I mean, we're not going to go chapter by chapter, but that's the one that touches on the feels are real kind of stuff. And I just wanted to I didn't have much to highlight that hasn't already been discussed, but I pulled up this just because he has this tendency to pull up graphs and stuff that almost look like shit posts. And here you
Yeah.
have the Catholic alpha male abstains from sexual intercourse and childcare, even though there is no genetic or ecological reason for him to do so. This is such a strange way of putting it.
I mean,
This is your mind on evolution, kids.
Yeah.
Evolutionary psychology, sorry. Yeah.
Yeah. And also I found this that I wrote up. He had this really interesting throwaway comment about the human morphology, the Homo sapiens morphology vis-a-vis the chimpanzee morphology, and that this was done to our more upright posture was to support the increased weight of our cerebellums, and that we kind of paid for all of this with neck and back aches.
Yeah.
Like, you have never been to the gym, have you?
Yeah, right. Just go outside and it's fine. Walk in the, like, that's not even like a joke, the sort of, that doctors have rediscovered, right? If you have back pains, go outside and walk in the woods. That's the best thing you can do.
Yeah.
For you.
That's why you have neck and because you're in an unnatural position. You're meant to move around, and
But
he
in
also
Harare's worldview, the solution isn't to go out into the woods. It's to, like, we're just going to give you a tech spine or something.
yeah, you need to go to a
A cybernetic spine, yeah.
Yeah, probably. I mean, he also completely goes around the small and rather pertinent fact of this evolutionary adaptation, which is that humans are not ambush predators. We're extreme persistent hunters, and that the morphology of the human as being hairless and being upright with the displacement arrangement of our limbs, say length of limb to length of back and so on, is essentially made to jog or walk fast for days on end without stopping.
Mm. And the muscles in our buttocks as well.
Yeah, it's extremely energy efficient for that kind of movement, and the forward-facing eyes and the large cerebellum is needed in a sense to be able to abstractly track prey that you can't see, because it's run away into the bushes across the hill, over the next hill. It's hiding out
Be
in
able to
a
visualize where it would potentially be, yes.
yeah. You have to have a three-dimensional map of your hunting territory, and you have to be able to, okay, where the fuck did that deer go?
Exactly, yes.
It probably went over there. Oh, yes, I can see some freshly disturbed grass, a broken branch. Let's go that way. Then it has probably run off there
Today
into
it's
that
used to
meadow.
fix null pointer exceptions.
Yeah. So and then you go into the thing that you get too close, the deer fucks off in like a racing car,
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, and it runs and runs and runs until it can't see you anymore, and then it stops. It's exhausted. Its heart is beating
Fuel.
like a
Yeah.
jackhammer, and it's overheating. And then just when it feels safe, there you fucking are
The
again.
fucking monkey walks out of the brush again. Yeah.
Yeah, it comes like slow running at you, and you're just like, what the? And off it goes.
A horror
Ah,
movie for a
safe.
deer. Yeah.
There they are again. How did they find you? You ran like for half an hour. So that's essentially the mode of hunting for humans, and also built for hunting with tools. Yeah.
And
Uh,
in his part 2, let's move on.
yeah.
I suppose from the evolutionary stuff. Is when he gets into agricultural stuff, and that's where most of his, I suppose,
Oops.
romanticization of some of it is in the first part, but it really kicks off in the part 2 of Sapiens, where he talks about, you know, how
Yeah, yeah.
societies basically gets built around
Uh,
agriculture.
he starts waxing lyric about the wholesome and varied diet, the relatively short working week, and the rarity of infectious diseases. Blah blah
Yeah.
blah. It's like, yeah, sure. And have you ever heard of the American short-nosed bear?
Yes. I don't have a lot of interesting things to say about his middle parts, to be honest. Like, part 2 is the agricultural revolution. There's a lot of this weird thing he does where for like 2 pages he'll just go off on a history lesson where he's just stating history, and then
Yeah,
he
and
doesn't
then
really do anything about it.
no,
Yeah.
and then does nothing, goes off on a completely pointless tangent, and
Yeah.
then states something completely well, and then he just lies for a page, more or less,
Right.
to
So
get out what he wants
the
to.
middle parts of Sapiens are the, you know, the hardest ones, because he's really not saying a lot.
No, he just goes. He essentially just does his standard spiel.
Yes.
I mean, he also goes into, blitz theory that somehow like 2 million people over a period of about 1,000 years killed. What was it, like over 80 million mammoths, stuff like
Yeah.
that. Yeah, sure. We eradicated all the megafauna, and when we have killed all the mammoths, we had like even more of all the other creatures. Like, it's just on the face of it, it's just so fucking stupid. But
Very strange. Yeah.
and he does that thing again there when he goes into domestication. Like, oh yeah, the dog has been with us for like 15,000 years, very long. The only problem is that it's between 40 and 50,000 at least. That's the oldest remains found, quite possibly older. So again, it's these weird little lies that doesn't really seems to serve a purpose in themselves, that I find
No, but they build a picture
charming.
of you know, the whole becomes very different. But I don't see why he does it, because I read them as well, and I, in the back of my mind, I go, wait, hang on a minute, I thought I read something else somewhere else, or you know, remember from watching a documentary that number is wrong, right? And and it doesn't have any consequence then and there. But I suppose, you know, if you sprinkle in enough like tiny stuff, you can get away with some of the larger lies once the scaffolding is already in place.
He has I think one of those a couple of 2 pages where he essentially uh, tries to explain these, 2 to 2.5 million years of nothing, absolutely nothing. And I think it is somehow in a service of that idea that, nothing happened until 10,000 years ago when the agricultural revolution came about.
Right.
People were just, running around with looking at sticks and living this utopian life for a couple of million years, and then for whatever reason someone went, agriculture, from nowhere.
Yeah, it just
So I think
happened.
it might be in the service of the liberal position of gradualism, that everything builds upon the it's an ever
It
increasing
was a
slope.
natural evolution that
Yeah,
agriculture
there are
happened. Yeah.
no ups and downs and reversal. It's just a slow, gradual build up to the crescendo of liberal democracy, uh, which is a bit weird. But I guess even the liberals need their founding mythos in some way.
Yeah.
It's like you see that a lot, and especially within our circles, quote, and then for no reason at all.
Suddenly, for no reason at all. Yeah.
Yeah,
Dot
yeah.
dot dot.
Yeah,
Except he's just
all of
doing
that
it
going around.
with like agriculture and other inventions.
Yeah, it's a bit weird because he dedicates like a page to Göbekli Tepe, and kind of like, oh, that was weird, that kind of happened just like that, and then he doesn't, goes nowhere with it and never mentions it again.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, it's just the foundation of modern agrarian society, but yeah, let's not talk too much about that. People might you know get ideas, or ask pertinent questions.
It is one of the
Exactly.
things that I've been thinking about, like reading him when he's trying to do this big history thing, that you kind of at the intersection of evolutionary theory and doing actual history. That, like, in the when you have like this evolutionary evil psych, or this evolutionary perspective, you just have to look at where we are now and think that there was like this mechanical process that brought us here, and the mechanical process rewards adaptability. So every single thing that we do has to have some kind of adaptive reason, some sort of, and then they'll just make up pretty much anything. Like, the reason you have morning wood is that, like, the men who didn't have morning wood, they didn't reproduce before they went out to hunt bears, and then they got killed, and such. But the other side, if you're studying history, you realize that there are a lot of ups and downs and things that happens for completely arbitrary reasons and so on, and things that, like, absolutely are not essential or not necessary to be the way that they are, in a sense. So there's a question of how do you balance out really the ideas of, like, the ups and downs and the arbitrariness of history with the kind of almost necessary explanation of evolution, where things have to always move towards efficiency and adaptability.
He goes into this a little bit when he is talking about all the taming and subjugation, as he uses as an interesting word, of various domesticated animals, and that this was a completely rationalistic and mechanistic idea, that people we're going to do it this way, and then it had this outcome, and this was good, and so forth. And it's kind of as we go back into this idea that you talked about there, that things aren't really, or that sometimes things are just arbitrary. Things just happen. It wasn't really planned. And if you ever went to a natural history museum and saw a skeleton of a grown aurochs, the origin of our common cozy little cuddly cows, the idea that someone would, from a rational perspective, take a look at an aurochs and go, I'm gonna milk that thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Use it to go.
For the people in the audience, I'll pull up a picture here. Let me see if I can get something that has height, at least somewhat relatable. Yeah, here we go. Okay. Open image. Now this is next to a small child, so you can think that this probably, I mean, that thing would probably reach me to maybe my chest, or well, it's standing on a platform, so yeah. And those horns are quite dangerous. I was talking the other day with some friends about the phenomenon of wild hogs in Americas, and the meme of, you know, why do you need guns? It's to kill the feral hogs that roam in the countryside, and even how much a small quote unquote feral hog can actually hurt you if they want to, and then you scale it up to this size, right?
Yeah, that's a kind of a small one. I'm gonna send you in the private chat here on StreamYards. I think this is let's see. How do you send pictures in StreamYards? Can you do that?
I don't think you can.
No, you can send
After-
URLs.
Yeah, I'll send it to you in the on Element.
Okay, yeah, sure, and I can bring it up.
You can bring it up there for an example.
Oh,
This
that's
is
a
more,
reconstruction. Nice.
yeah, it's a reconstruction of a grown aurochs bull. So this is probably a female that we see the
Right.
yeah, and you can see the step ladder.
Yeah, you see the step later, yeah.
Yeah, and your idea is you see that
I'm gonna go
walk
fuck with
around
that.
in the local forest and meadows and go, yeah, I can use that thing to draw my plow.
Yeah, if I just ask it nicely.
Yeah, I'm gonna write up a plan. It's like a 50-step plan. It's gonna run over 20 years, and man, this is gonna work. So I don't really think it worked exactly that way as he tries to lay it out as a completely, you know.
And then suddenly one day for no reason at all. Dot dot
Yeah,
dot.
there was cow.
Yeah.
I think that the thing is much like the domestication of the dog. Certain species were probably more of an accident than a concerted effort. I mean, domestication of a goat, for example. I mean, they are naturally quite timid and not all that small animal, not all that big animals. The same of the origins of sheep, which are also sort of goat, but or rather a mountain goat. So that would have been a lot easier. But things like cows or say for example the pig. Anyone who has seen a wild boar, a wild Eurasian boar, knows that.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
You don't fuck with those. Yeah.
No, they're probably, with the exception of bears, probably the most dangerous animal around.
Yeah. And in part 3, he gets into more societal, larger structures, empires, religions. I'm going to pull up another one just because I'm so amused by the way he uses, graphics in this book, because it all looks like someone's like trying to joke with you using forms or like scientific presentations. So the subtext here is: religion is a system of human norms and values that is founded on belief in a superhuman order. The theory of relativity is not a religion, because at least so far there are no human norms and values that are founded on it. Football is not a religion, because nobody argues that its rules reflect superhuman edicts. Islam, Buddhism, and communism are all religions, because all are system of human norms and values that are founded on belief in a superhuman order. Note the difference between superhuman and supernatural. The Buddhist law of nature and the Marxist law of history are superhuman, since they were not legislated by humans. Yet they are not supernatural.
Yeah,
It's just a very funny graphic. And I just don't understand why he couldn't just write that. Why he had to create that shit post.
It's great.
really stupid. I see a speedrunner there asked what's Göbekli Tepe. Göbekli Tepe is archaeological site in Anatolia, on the coast in modern-day Turkey. Walrus, I sent you a picture via Element to explain. Göbekli Tepe is the essentially the origin of agricultural activity within the European basin, the European and well, it is the origin really of modern agriculture.
There it is.
This is a small part of the site. These pillars are maybe 4 to 5 meters tall, intricately carved with bas reliefs, and the site is massive. It goes on
I was
for
going to say,
several square miles.
is this the place that's sort of considered the oldest, civilization that we have record of, or am I thinking of something else?
No, this Göbekli Tepe is essentially a cult site. There
okay.
there are no cities, there are no habitations around.
Oh, okay. Then I'm
Just
thinking of something else.
no. This site essentially appears out of nowhere in the archaeological record by the end of the Younger Dryas period, so 12,000 years ago. And it's a bit of a conundrum for modern archaeology, because it essentially put a very large hammer in all their existing theories. Because the thing is that you can quite rapidly see that most of the say wheat sorts that are dispersed through the Fertile Crescent at this point originate at this site. And the thing is that there is no agriculture in the area before the erection of this site. So the site more or less is erected, and then from it flows the ideas of agriculture, domestication of animals, and probably rudimentary metalworking. So essentially, the site is a place not perhaps religious, but rather a place of technology transfer. And the thing is that after it ceased to be active, it was ritually buried. That is why it is so well preserved, because it was intentionally buried to be preserved.
Interesting.
And the interesting thing is that the site was active for almost 800 years, and you can trace through the strata of the layers, because it was expanded with more pillars, more areas, and the oldest ones are the best, so to speak. As the site is expanded over the centuries, the craftsmanship is poorer, the bas relief carvings become more primitivistic, the pillars become smaller. So essentially, what you see is a degradation in craftsmanship. So what the leading theory is essentially that what you have here is that the first generation that put up the first core of the site is essentially the one who has the working knowledge, and everyone is essentially then trying to keep it alive.
Imitating it, yeah.
Yeah, they are imitating it, but the pressures of the lifestyle that they are living means that they don't have the time or the tools to emulate the high skill level of the initial impulse that are coming in here.
The giants who walk the earth, so to speak.
Yeah, yes, more or less. So
that's very interesting. I did not know about this place, but this, this has reignited my my Evolian passion for saying Atlantis is real.
Yeah, probably. That the thing is that what you essentially have here is I realized that this is
It,
this
it, fe- it
massive
feels like a
tangent.
microcosm of sort of, this whole perennial Rene Guénon, Spengler type cycle, right?
Yeah, the thing is also that one should remember here that the end of the Younger Dryas is essentially the end of the Ice Age. This is to frame this so people understand what we're talking about here, and the idea, rather not the idea, but the scientific record rather would state that as this is the end of the dry age, this site essentially comes up after that the what is called within the archaeological record meltwater pulse 1A and 1B that raises the sea level by almost 30 meters over the course
Right.
of less than a couple of hundred years, and the pulses show that the sea level came up in two distinct pulses from marine archaeology, and they probably in less than a month. And this is probably the origin of the various flood myths.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, that's
And
something
this is
that a lot of records mention, isn't it?
Yeah, and the meltwater pulse 2B, 1 or 1B is a little bit diffuse, but 1A, is essentially now been confirmed, coming from that a massive uh, bombardment of meteorites coming out of the toroid meteor stream that the Earth passes through once in early summer and once in December, twice a year. It's an asteroid belt from a massive ruptured comet that Earth passes through twice a year. And that cometary debris from this one came into the Earth's gravity well and impacted the Laurentide ice sheet that was over Canada and Greenland in a massive bombardment that essentially was the equivalent of, I think, 5 times the current nuclear arsenal of all countries on Earth.
Jesus. Yeah.
So, and this essentially was carved out the Grand Canyon and the large scablands in Northern America when this wall of water just went out into the Pacific.
Yeah, yeah.
And you can see 3 foot high black matte layer, as it is called, over Northern America, parts of Europe and Siberia, where it rained mud, feet of mud, by this ejecta coming up into the atmosphere and then falling
Jesus.
down. And you can find like these large debris fields of just mammoths, woolly rhinoceroses, and other megafauna just been ripped to shreds, and they have looked like when you examine the long bones, they are filled with pellets from essentially they
From this
look like
event.
they've been shot with a grape shot, and it's full of rare earth minerals, essentially asteroid impacts that have impacted, exploded,
And
like
then rained back down on the
yeah,
earth,
essentially like
basically. Yeah.
grenades, and just
Jesus.
and the shock waves have just ripped them apart. And you can find these enormous drifts of animal remains in Northern America and southern Canada
Right.
at dig sites. So we can do a stream on this one,
Yeah,
but
this is a whole different topic that we need to look into because this
yeah,
sounds very
this
cool,
is
if
essentially
nothing else.
the place that go just appears from this one.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
it might be interesting to think that marine archaeology has also found enormous megalithic sites within the Mediterranean basin of what pre this raising of the sea levels were essentially coastal plains.
Yeah. Okay, I think with that we should go on to the fourth part of Sapiens, which is when he gets into the modern era with the scientific revolution and economy.
Yes, and the mentality of conquest, as he calls it.
Yes, and the the greed of capitalism and all of that. This is where I feel like this is where he is most sort of brazen about his personal views. Like he puts aside the historian here and just sort of goes into opinion mode quite often. I have another of these graphs I just have to show. Give me a moment here. Here it is. It is how the pre-modern and the modern economy works. So there's little trust in the future, which means little credit, which means slow growth, which means little trust in the future, and so on. And in the modern economy, this is Harari's explanation for why the GDP just keeps growing. There's much trust in the future, there's much credit, there's fast growth, which means there's much trust. Big trust, big credit, big growth. America number one.
Yeah.
Some guy just walked into all of the governments in the world and pitched this stuff. It's like, this is where we are right now here on the left. We want to be on the right there with like big credits, and it just fast growth and everything. It's just a giant bubble, guys, who just keep pumping the machine. And
Yeah. Let's
I think Harari is an economist. Nordhuger says, imagine if economics actually worked like that. Yes. Now there is some merit to keeping the economy small in that sense, but this is a very, very simplified view of economics that is it's not going to hold up to scrutiny. No. I don't know if you have any comments on this last part of the book, Leo.
I mean, it's really hard to have a pithy statement on the end of this book, because it's so meandering. I mean, he has like the chapter on chemical happiness and how we should do this and that, and what was it? He scribbled so like, nothing captures the biological argument better than the famous New Age slogan, "Happiness begins within."
Yes, that's a very good quote, actually. Yeah,
powerful position. None of this will bring you happiness. Lasting happiness come only from serotonin, dopamine, and oxytocin. Like, okay then. And then he starts talking about Aldous Huxley, Brave New World. So it's like,
yeah, he does. It's very strange because he's just sort of talked about how this is going to be great, and then he references Huxley, who says, no, this is going to be hell.
and then he frames it within the context of like the meaning of life.
Yeah. And he pulls a weird like, yeah, but we're going to be really nice to you guys.
Yeah. Oh boy.
It did not fill me with confidence. Let me put it like that. And there is some, he talks about. I don't want to, just rag him on him in that sense, because he does cover things like scientific revolution. When, he's not too bad when he's just like listing off his history stuff. I mean, it's not very interesting, but he'll just, I'm going to talk about, how steam power was invented for like 4 pages randomly, which is like, okay, it's not, I'm not having a bad time, but I'm not really learning anything either. So why am I here? Right.
Yeah. And then he goes into this, I think he has this kind of rant, which is essentially eugenics, but he frames it within that.
Is the whole, like the last Tasmanian bit?
No. This is about how he goes into like the selective breeding of chickens, so that they can introduce new
Oh
characteristics.
yeah. This is
Blah
his
blah
whole
blah.
anti-capitalist rant that leads into the veganism.
Yeah, and it's like, dude, what the hell? So it's like, and I think it took up was like you remember in the he talks about within this context. I think it's the you remember in the early noughts, after the early 2000s, when there was this rage among gene scientists to make bioluminescent animals, like they
Oh
made
yeah.
fish and I think and the rabbit and stuff like that is fucking
Mhm.
horrible. Like, look what we can do. It's like, yeah, please don't.
Yeah. It was after they did the cloning, the bioluminescent was the next thing.
Mm. Yeah, I think the idea was that was to view how you could bridge certain genomic traits from, I think they took it from jellyfish or something like that, and enter it into other organisms to make them and then tinker with the rest, to make them hairless and stuff like that, so you can actually see the bioluminescence and stuff like that. And
Yeah.
he's also like starts talking about cybernetic engineerings and cyborgs, and then just drops it and doesn't do anything else with it. It's like, okay.
Yes,
Again, I
the
will
book
restate
ends very
with
strangely.
he needs a fucking editor.
Yeah. Yeah, it's having, at the end of the book, I don't want to, make a meme out of it, but it feels like he just sort of like sat down in my kitchen and started talking, and that's the entire book, right?
Yeah,
And and
yeah,
I've just let him rant for like 5 hours.
yeah, more or less. Yeah, and Nordhauer says they're making the frogs glow. Yeah, they're not gay, just gay. They're actually glowies as well. I think if glow in the dark is still around here, he could appreciate that.
Yeah, you could probably confirm.
Yeah, he might have been through that lab.
Yes. I think that's a brief overview of the Sapiens book. It's I suppose if you, and I suppose that's also why that why it became so popular, because if you live within the truth regime of today, this all makes a lot more sense to you um, than if you don't. And so it's
Mm.
a very easy read. He obviously knows how to convey information, and I gave him a hard time for his graphs, but they're very easy to understand for someone who doesn't want to spend too much brain power understanding graphs.
Yeah,
Um,
I think this is because I remember, some of the midwits at work were raging about this when it came out. So I think it was then I got my copy because they said, "Oh, you gotta read this," and I threw it. It was like, yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
I don't know if this is your impression, but I mean, usually with books like this that become bestsellers, where they're actually bought and sold among these midwits, usually they will just read the first part. And because I had one at my job as well who recommended this book to me, and that's why I read it. But he had only read the first part, and he was just talking about this sort of how bad agriculture was and how hunter gatherers was just was awesome. And of course, there's a lot in this book, but it seems like after you get through
That
the
is a good
first,
point, because
yeah.
that's my impression too of when I've talked to people who have read this book. That's usually the thing they bring up.
Yeah, I don't think they have read the last, sub chapters about the bionic life forms, the singularity, uh, and the bio-Leninism stuff like that. I think they kind of tapped out before it got really dark.